Christof is a software entrepreneur, investor, and LGBTQ plus advocate. He's the founder and CEO of Hornet, which is the world's leading queer social network with over 30 million users. He also founded Queer Spaces, a group chat platform for building queer communities. Christof is also managing partner at Strive Capital, investing in early stage mobile applications. And he holds a Master of Science in Management from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, where he was a Sloan Fellow in the class of 2004, and author of the case studies on MySQL and Google's Android, FYI. So today we've got what I think this is a fascinating subject, because he's covering how metrics can lead us to make the wrong decisions. Right? We're quite data-driven in this business, aren't we? So you're looking at numbers, you're looking at the evidence, we're kind of scientifically proving out the justifications for any tweaks that we make in our apps. And well, how can we get that right, and how do we get it wrong? Christof's going to give us some overview of how we might be getting it wrong. So, Christof, the floor is yours. How are you doing you've got a presentation for us?
Battery still looks all right, but somehow I see myself very stretched. Do you see me all right on the screen?
I'm not seeing your presentation yet, so let me call on my wife.
No, the presentation not yet, but just my own
Irene,
image.
can you help?
All right.
What's going on? So did Irene give you the overview of how to turn on the presentation mode?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, because I'm not seeing it. So it's not coming up for us. We don't see your presentation yet. I'll tell you what, I'll bow out, because I'm not sure if I'm blocking. I am. There we go, we've got it. Right, so the floor is yours, Christof. I'll bow out.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me, and welcome everyone to this event. Thanks for creating these events where we can share thoughts. This presentation is really an idea of Mark, who invited me to the IDEA conference in Reykjavik earlier in August, a month ago. And I was talking about the same topic, and he said I should share it with this group. So I'm happy to do and comply today, though I'm not sure you all get as much out of it as you want, but let me give it a try. So first of all, a little about myself. I'm a longtime entrepreneur. Mark already did the introduction. When it comes to dating, I'm already partnered for 27 years with my now husband, Juan, since it became legal in the United States in 2013. And apart from working, I'm also a trail runner, and just came back from the World Championship in Chamonix last weekend, where I ran 100 kilometers. But today the topic is dating, and I'm going to talk about Hornet, which some of you may know. It's one of the leading gay social networks on this planet, with 40 million users. But beware, this is a vanity metrics. I get into the 2.5 million MAU or 800,000 DAUs in much more detail later. Our top markets are all around the globe, from Asia through Europe, through South America. We have been around for quite a while, for 12 years overall. We originally bootstrapped with some angel funding, and then raised one institutional round of venture funding in 2016 from Ventec China, $40 million. Since 2018, we are profitable, grow from our own cash flow. And overall, if you want to think about Hornet in comparison to other gay dating or quote unquote dating sites, our focus has always been much more on community and providing, if you will, to speak with Dimitri's word, social discovery that goes beyond dating. So that's a bit about the background, but I'm going to talk now about what I did talk about in Reykjavik in Iceland. And that was the view of my hotel room, which was fascinating. I haven't been to Reykjavik before. Iceland, and if you haven't been, I highly recommend it. This was 10 p.m. at night, and the sun was still kind of up. What you see is a somewhat tranquil sea right in front of you, but what it really is underneath is a very messy, turbulent body of water, which has many, many different streams of cold and hot water. So what looks for the eye is like a quiet and tranquil sea may actually be something very different. And we'll get to that in a bit more minute. That's the topic I'm going to talk about, how metrics can lead us to make wrong decisions. The topic has many incarnations. I think some of you may have obviously will understand or have your own understanding about the ideas that I'm going to present. Like about 20 years ago when I went to business school, we were talking about the flaw of averages. And the typical example of the flaw of averages was always that people can get
people can drown in a lake that's on average 3 feet deep. So that's obviously something, on average, a lake has a certain depth, but obviously that depth may simply not be at the point where you enter the water and obviously can drown. And of course, you probably all know and have understanding around the ideas of that the average or a mean are often just used to describe distributions which can be narrow or broad, and so on and so forth. So nothing really new for most or all of you there. I'm going to talk about using data and often average data in decision making for business leaders in particular, and that's the example of Hornet. The second element that I want to layer onto this, which is beyond just the average type of using metrics for decision making, is the fact that we in the dating industry, or at least in the online dating industry in particular, always talk about network products. Network products are those that are basically benefiting from the number of users that are part of, or relevant users that are part of a given network. So in dating, obviously, if you're the only person on a dating site, the network is useless to you and everyone else, because obviously you can't be dating anyone if no one else is there. And the more users or relevant users you gain on that network, the better obviously are the chances of getting a match, i.e. the usefulness of the network increases as you have more members or relevant members in a network. So those are called network effects. You probably all know them, but that's the core understanding or definition of a network that I would like to use here. Obviously, there's other form of networking. You can have networking events, but we're talking strictly about the mathematical and idea of networking. And when it comes to networking, the mandatory reading at our company, and I would really recommend everyone who is in this industry to read The Cold Start Problem, a book by Andrew Chen, which is basically the compendium about building network products, which obviously start with the big major initial problem, which is called the cold start problem. If you have 0 users on a platform, the platform is useless. So how do you overcome the ghost town effect or cold start problem? I'm mentioning this book because it is a great framework for us to understand that average, or the flaw of averages, is particularly insidious in network products, because network products have different stages in which you need to do different things. And that, I think, is the core of the Andrew Chen book, so all credits go to him. He distinguishes 5 different stages, from the cold start to tipping point to escape velocity, ceiling, and a moat. And in each of those phases, and that's the important takeaway from the book, you will need to do very, very different things to compete successfully in your market. In addition, he also says many things about what is actually a relevant network. So when we talk, for instance, about Uber, which obviously is a company you work for, and uses it as an example in various stages of the book, you obviously, as a passenger in Chicago, you are not really caring whether there is more drivers available in Los Angeles. You need a relevant or atomic network. And that is a term we are also using. And all these terms are very, very useful to understand and optimize decision-making in dating, because obviously if someone is not relevant for you, or relevant people are not available for you, then obviously you may have an incremental cold start problem, though you may have a lot of users on average, but the relevant users for a specific atomic network may not be available. Anyways, let me go and share with you from a practical perspective how this looks like, and give you a bit of confidence that I'm getting or leading you down a path that is actually actionable and successful. So you see some of the numbers of Hornet's revenue over the last few quarters, over 3 different revenue types. We have advertising revenue, subscription revenue, and gifting revenue. We call it Honey. And you see that we have been growing quite strongly. And this is very much down to the fact that we are working with these network concepts, and the idea that not every average metric is the one you want to look at. You see similar numbers also around DAU growth. It has been around for quite a while, so our growth is somewhat moderate, but on the flip side, we have been able to kind of egg out the growth with basically zero marketing spending. Hornet has spent very, very little to nothing over the last 5 years in marketing. Here is a way how we run and look at the company on a key global level. So I just take a set of numbers per week for user growth. And you see a couple of metrics that which you probably will recognize, like DAUs, daily active users, or the ratio of daily active users over monthly active users, and so on and so forth. New account creation and retention and so on, and average messages per user per day. You will see here changes on those metrics on a 1 week and 4 week horizon, and we color code them a little bit. You see slight green and some red, depending on whether something has gone up in 1 week and 4 weeks or vice versa. Overall, though, it looks a bit like the sea in Reykjavik. It looks kind of, kind of goes sideways. And you will often hear that in your discussion where there's a little up, there's a little down, there's a little sideways. You don't really see that much when you look at those numbers, because they're kind of, very mellow, very moderate. And at least that's probably true for a company that has a certain maturity. So when you actually then go one level deeper, what we are doing is we're actually breaking down those numbers by atomic networks. And atomic networks for us is basically a proxy for countries, because obviously a user in Turkey will have, more benefit from using Hornet if there is more users in Turkey as well, though he doesn't benefit as much if we gain an additional user in Brazil. So we have language barriers and proximity barriers, which are then somehow creating relevant network cells. And this is important to understand, that each one of those networks has a stage as defined by Andrew Chen. It could be a cold start situation where the network is simply not working, or it could be a white, red hot network where everyone needs to be who wants to be connected to anyone who is relevant. And then you have a very, very different market dynamic based on those network effects. And if you look at some of those numbers, you see that these slight changes already become a little more colorful if you actually look at the various countries. These are our top 10 countries. They're by DAUs, by daily active users, and they're in different network stages. Some are in escape velocity, some are at a ceiling, which means we're defending against competition. Some are in a cold start phase, though they still have enough users simply because they're very large, but we are the underdog. So we have different network effects. So what we need to do is looking at those numbers to understand what is, what we're seeing here in the St. Marcus Square in Venice. Are we looking at a wave, like a little wave? Are we looking at a tide, or are we looking at climate change? So we need to dissect those numbers, to understand what is it that you're actually seeing here. And that's what we're doing here with some purview on the network stage. Hornet, for instance, and this is public information, that's why I can share it, ranks, like if you take App Store ranks, very, very high in certain markets. We're #1 market leader in, let's say, countries like Thailand or Turkey or Russia for that matter, but we are #2 or less in many other markets, which means we have a, if that's a proxy for market share and then hence competitive dynamics, which means we have very different dynamics to deal with in each one of those markets. And here the law of averages comes back in. If I look at any of these markets and make an average decision globally, I will end up under-optimizing for each of the markets. So let's say in a market where we are market leader and are very strong, we need to do a very different set of activities, really following the Andrew Chen playbook, compared to markets where we are an underdog or where basically there's not enough liquidity to even make dating and using the app a worthwhile experience. I give you another example on some other metrics like average daily active users and on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly change versus revenue per daily active users. So which of course shows you a little bit that growth for mature sites like ours usually comes from revenue optimization more than from daily active user growth, but both play a part of it. Here again, it looks like, we have a very simple story. Everything looks hunky-dory and we can all go back to the beach and enjoy our margaritas. But when you actually look at the countries, you see there's a lot of motion under the surface. So you see every country has very different dynamics on a 1 month, 1 quarter, and 1 year time horizon. Some are growing very fast, some are losing, and some can be driven by user growth, and some can be driven by monetization growth changes. In fact, I would like to take one country, the 5th country here, into consideration. This is the market where we have been traditionally losing users over the time, and we have been declining in market share. This is a country where we then decided to stop the decline in market share by lowering our prices. So you see a very deliberate decision to mark and paint the lower 3 rows in red by lowering prices significantly or reducing the ad load for these users. And as you can see, as a result, we are able, and I show this to you in a plotted graph, from what was the 2021, 2022, and 2023 in red graph, that over the years, we basically stopped our decline and turned it around, which of course is a pretty simple strategy. If you lower prices, you will get more market share or at least retain or become more competitive. But what I wanted to say here is this is a strategy that we needed to do in this particular market where network effects were against us. We had a mode problem. We couldn't defend our pretty high market share. We had over 100,000 daily active users in that country. In other countries, though, we don't have that issue. So here, lowering prices would be just throwing away money. What most managers end up doing, though, is they take an average approach. So they lower prices a little bit in markets or compete with new product features a little bit in all markets or in all relevant networks, and end up under-optimizing because you may not do enough for this particular market that we are looking at in terms of price lowering, but you may give away money in other markets, and vice versa. You may add a feature where in this market it's really just about pricing, whereas you're building product features that this market may not even need. They just care about paying a little less, which is really what's happening. And last not least, I give one more example. And this, again, I'm just sharing as I shared with our colleagues in Reykjavik. This is a revenue type which is pretty new to us. It's based on the Meet Groups, which is a sponsor on this event, video live streaming technology called Livebox, something we successfully implemented at Hornet 2 years ago. Here you see, for instance, we're growing 130% in that revenue category year over year, and also had great quarterly and monthly numbers globally. But here you see even more how each country has completely different dynamics. So C2, the second country in this list, makes $100,000 in monthly revenue, growing 270%, versus other countries barely make $300. So again, a global average number doesn't tell you anything. You will need to understand how the dynamics in each of these network markets or each of these network segments are planning out and then act accordingly. So that's, to wrap it up, my recommendations for you. All of this, of course, is assuming you have a certain product market fit. If you don't have a product that has product market fit, probably then you need to do some more basic work. But once you have a certain amount of liquidity and you're starting optimizing your networks, then it's important to identify what your relevant atomic networks are. And relevant really means, who adds more value to the network or to which users of the network, and they become the so-called atomic network. And again, this is an expression from Andrew Chen. We are, as a homosexual dating app, we are a one-sided network, so every user adds value to every other users, but there's also two-sided networks, which traditionally would be something like a e-commerce site or Uber, which has drivers and passengers. And obviously that's true for heterosexual networks as well, where often women are the hard side of the network. Again, a term that's borrowed from Andrew Chen. So you need to understand which of the network sides and how do you optimize those parts for in the eyes of the users from a relevancy. And the second point is to operationalize the business then ground up. Again, the Uber example, if you give, for instance, steep drivers discount to get more drivers on your network in Chicago, it does not make a difference in Los Angeles. On the flip side, If you then give a little bit of global, like let's say in both markets, a little bit of driver incentives, you may give away money in one and undershoot in the other, which means on average, you're going to make a double wrong decision. So you need to optimize for each of the atomic networks from the ground up and understand what the competitive and network pressures are. You need to separate waves, tides, and climate change to understand what is just noise versus what is a real underlying trend and what is, let's say, a cyclical seasonal event, for instance. If you can, and that's what we do, we customize for each market. So our pricing, our product appearance, and even our, of course, competitive strategy in each of those markets are very tailored and customized. So we may be running a low price strategy in one market. In another market, we run a very feature-rich, high price point and high value strategy. All of this can be explored very well with A/B tests, which need to run as long as you possibly can. Google runs them up to 6 months. And to get all of this done, you need a lot of hopefully capable, often young, hardworking, and data diligence analysts that will do all the homework for you. So that's my recommendations. I hope you found this useful as a sort of view from how we run the business here at Hornet over the last few years, with very successful growth in the last few years in particular.